Hello Year 8 and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be taking a look at the military side of the English Civil War. Now we've done lots on the causes of it, so let's think about what it was actually like to live through. Today we're going to be focusing on the different forms of soldier within the Civil War and the key features of each army. Let's start with a horrible history song. Watch the English Civil War song and write down your impressions of the two sides. So what key words come to mind when you're looking at the King's army, and what key words come to mind when you're looking at the parliamentarians? How would you describe each army? Now, you might have written down for the King's army, perhaps extravagant, rich. Look at their clothing, it's all very flamboyant, is it? It's feathers and velvet. They talk about loving the king, so loyalty to their king. And if we look at the parliamentarians, they look much more sedate and dull and boring. They're much more about religion, and in particular about perhaps Puritanism. That's why Oliver Cromwell is there, and they seem to be wearing very boring, simple clothing. So this is our general stereotype of the two sides of the English Civil War. Let's look at it a bit further this lesson. Let's start off with an introduction to the nicknames of each army. Now, the King's army was often called the Cavaliers, and that's because some of them fought on horseback, and the French word for horse is chevalier. So you can see where it comes from. Now, stereotypically, the King's army was made up more of nobility and gentry, so the wealthier parts of the population. And they tended to come from the north and west of the country. Now, the stereotype of the cavalier we can see there in the image. It's that of a more flamboyant soldier, a man who has long hair, wore fancy clothes, and particularly maybe we'd think of the word dandy perhaps. Now this is because, of course, they were the wealthier, so they had more money to spend on such things. I just want to stress, however, this is quite a big stereotype. So the King's army was equally made up of poorer people as well. Not everybody in there was extremely wealthy. And in fact, interestingly, half of the MPs joined the King's side, not Parliament's side. So these are broad stereotypes that I'm drawing here. They're not necessarily 100% accurate. Now let's talk about parliamentarian army. Now the parliamentarian army was nicknamed the Roundheads, and that comes from their hairdo, but also their helmets. Now they tended perhaps to be a bit more Protestant, a bit more puritanical, and lots of them were motivated by their belief that God wanted them to drive out a Catholic king, to make England more Protestant. Typically they came from the south and east, places like East Anglia, like around Cambridgeshire, had really strong parliamentarian hotspots, and they tended to be more from the kind of middle classes, maybe the merchant classes. Now they, again, stereotypically wore more plain and simple clothing than the Cavaliers. So there's your two keywords to take away, the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. Let's have a little look now at the weapons that each side used. So I'd like you to watch this clip from the Royal Armouries. As you watch, answer the 11 questions in your book. Write out the question and answer it below. You may need to stop the YouTube clip throughout so that you have enough time to answer. Now we're going to look at the 3 main types of soldier in each army. These are the cavalrymen, the pikemen, and the musketeers. I'd like you to go on to Show My Homework and download the information sheet on these 3. Then I want you to use that information to summarise each of the different kinds of soldiers in 50 words or less. Now I know that doesn't sound very many, but 50 words is very short. It's going to be difficult to cut down that information to only 50 words. So select the very best information that you can. Cut all the extra fat that you perhaps don't need. Only include the most important bits. You don't necessarily have to put it in full sentences. You can do it in note form as well. That's fine. Give it a go. Now I'd like you to complete the diagram to show how each kind of fighter would defeat the one next to him. So follow the arrows. Explain how a musketeer might beat a pikeman, how a pikeman might beat a man in the cavalry, how the cavalry might beat the musketeers. Here's some ideas for you. So the musketeers could shoot the pikemen from afar. The pikemen could aim at the chest of incoming cavalry. The cavalrymen could, they're fast enough to shoot or slay the opposing enemy. And your last task today is to do a little bit of source work. I'd like you to look at these 2 sources. You're going to use them to do a bit of work on the musketeer. Use source A in your own knowledge to describe the dangers faced by musketeers on the battlefield during the Civil War. And then use source B to describe the objects the musketeer is carrying in the image on this slide here. Well done, Year 8. You've worked hard this lesson.